Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transportation Exchange podcast, presented by Rush Truck Centers of Canada. I'm your host, Jason Cuddy. On today's episode, we are excited to welcome Chris Candy from Mobilizz. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this will be interesting because we're going to talk some tech today, get a little bit up to speed on everything your company does and kind of how it plays a factor in the industry. But before that, let's dive into yourself and give us some background on how you got into the industry.
Certainly, yeah. I was partnered, started an app development company called 7 Media, probably about 11 years ago now. Wow. And so through that, we started to get exposure. We were essentially a development lab, and companies would come to us and we'd develop apps for them. And we were starting to get really big into the augmented reality space, virtual reality space. And as a result, we were getting inquiries quite a bit around what we could do with fleets and fleet drivers, right? Gamification, driver safety, what they could be doing in terms of taking paperwork and going digital, and stuff like that. And started looking into it and started really seeing the advent or I guess the potential of the telematics space and seeing that this was going to be a really big market to get into. And so I started to veer out of the app development space and found a great company in Toronto to get involved with, Mobilizz. And it's been a great ride ever since. And that's been about 5 years or so now.
Nice. And so for those not familiar with Mobilizz, maybe give us a brief history of the company, where they came from and where they started.
Yeah, so the company's been around since 2002. We're a single source provider of telematics and connected vehicle solutions for fleets across North America. So we've been working with anywhere from fleet size of 5 upwards of over 1,000, and just helping them take their entire fleet through the telematics space. And the company being around since 2002, certainly a lot of experience in seeing where that technology has started, essentially just being very passive dots on a map to the live time information that we're getting on a second by second basis now, 24/7.
Nice. Yeah. And like I said, in 20 years, a lot has changed, from very simple geofencing and, breadcrumb tracing to live current data. So, and it's definitely not slowing down by any means.
Nope, that's for sure. Yeah, no, it's been very interesting to look back and see where it started and where it is now, and just really what the future holds. It's endless and very exciting.
So from a fleet point of view, if we're a fleet and we're looking at the technology that you guys work with, what are kind of some of the solutions or some of the options that we're looking at as far as implementing into our operations?
So telematics is really the crux of it all. And so we look at it as being essentially the operating system of your fleet, or really essentially the operating system of your vehicles. And so IoT, Internet of Things, is the big word. And so it's about really being able to connect to your truck, connect to your fleet, seeing all the activity and collecting all the information and data that the vehicle itself is able to put out. And through that one essentially network of data flow, we're able to add on a bunch of other things, be it dash cameras, tire pressure monitoring systems, temperature sensors, you name it. We can just start adding and building onto that, but with telematics being essentially the core driver of the flow of data.
Fair enough. And a lot of it, when we think telematics, I think I default to GPS. That's kind of, our headspace goes to where's my truck, maybe how fast is it going, and you geofence, to go in and out. But obviously you've got ELDs tie into this now. You've got a lot of productivity ways to measure, maybe touch on some of the things that, again, you've gone kind of high level of what's there, but, even from ELDs, you're pulling in that now with the technology? Yeah,
certainly. So everybody really looks at, and like you just said, dots on a map. Everybody thinks dots on a map, Big Brother, trying to catch everybody at the local coffee shop, getting together and not actually working or taking long lunches. 30% of the data that we're collecting now is actually location data. So 70% of this data has absolutely nothing to do with where the truck is. It's all engine data and things of that nature. And so ELD is one key component of that. The ELD mandate does specify that we do need to be collecting information straight off the ECM port of the vehicle. So telematics is required for that. And then after that, when you look at it, and people always say, well, what are the features? What can we do with this? But we look at it and look and say, if you came and you wanted to get a vacuum cleaner, you'd say, I need a vacuum cleaner. And people would say, well, what do you need it to do? But we look at it and say, well, your objective really is you need clean floors. You want to get your carpet clean and your floors clean. So now what do you need to do with that? And so we've taken the telematics space and broken it into essentially different silos, or not really silos, but areas of what you can be doing with it, being productivity, fleet maintenance, sustainability, and compliance. So ELD falling under that one compliance bucket.
Well, that makes sense because, again, we always think just dots on a map, but I think your analogy of explaining what are you trying to get out of the technology, probably because the technology can do way more than any of us really realize or can wrap our head around. And, you being in the space, every day and for as long as you guys have been, you know things other guys don't know that you can do with this technology. And
even still, I mean, being in it every day, we could sit here for the next 5 months, probably still not tick off everything that could possibly be done with this. So really looking at, and when we approach and talk to a fleet, or if you are a fleet looking to implement telematics, it's starting with what are the key things you're looking to get out of it, being whether it is productivity, whether it is maintenance, whether it is sustainability. Some people just care about fuel, trying to maintain and get a handle on their fuel costs. Some people bring it in just because they want to get compliant for the ELD mandate, and some maybe there was an accident that occurred last week, and so now they're looking to get a handle on their driver behavior.
Yeah, makes sense. And do you see, from here, we'll have fleets of hundreds, of trucks down to a guy with, 1, 2, or 3. And obviously everyone's needs is different. I think it goes back to what you're saying before. You're having a conversation, understanding what they're doing with it. But, do you see any trends as far as smaller fleets starting to really engage into the telematics side and pulling data out, like the big fleets kind of traditionally have already been doing for the last little while?
Oh, big time. And it's because, traditionally back in the day when it was dots on a map, people would say, well, I don't need this. I know where I am. Right. But now it's the involvement of this is now, with all the sensors and everything else, and the onboard computers on these trucks. I mean, you'd know very well, right? The amount of information that the engines are putting out. If you are just a single owner operator and the check to engine light goes off on the dashboard, you have absolutely no idea what that is, right? No. So in terms of an owner operating now, even if you are just you and maybe one other driver, now you're able to understand and look at what all that information is. So before you take the vehicle, your truck in, which is costly, getting downtime off the road and so on, you're able to know what is happening with that truck without having to take it anywhere. And so that's where we're seeing is those smaller fleets needing to get that information, but also just the efficiencies that they're getting out of their daily operation by having that sort of data and info.
Well, it makes sense because I think when you think smaller fleets, usually you've got a smaller office kind of behind it supporting it. So traditionally it's a guy wearing 5 different hats who's, he's the truck guy, but he's the warehouse shipping guy and he's the receptionist half the time answering the phone. Yeah. So when the technology from a truck can tell you, okay, yeah, check engine light comes on, nowadays it can mean anything. Back in the day, you could kind of almost diagnose it on the side of the road as 1 of 3 things went wrong with the truck. But now with the amount of computers on the truck, it's hard to tell. But having software in place that, you can see from the end user, look at it and say, okay, it's creating this fault code, which is this, which may tell me, hey, I can limp it home. I'm good. Get home. Yep. I can make my delivery still limp it home. Or nope, I got to tow it. But I can, again, call the shop ahead of time or, see if they got parts in stock. You can make a bit more of an informed decision that I think was always in the space of the large fleets. The large fleets always had that because they had a fleet guy. They had a fleet maintenance guy or someone dedicated to fleet who knew enough about maintenance that knew what was going on with these trucks. A guy with 3 trucks doesn't touch them. They bring their oil change. That's it. So I think it's kind of interesting to see how the technology has become usable for the average user who's not heavily knowledgeable in fleet maintenance per se even.
Yeah, correct. And what it's doing is it's giving them that power of if they don't have a dedicated fleet person overseeing their, 4 trucks, 5 trucks, whatever it may be. Now it's giving them that power to be able to operate at the level of those larger companies with the hundreds of thousands of trucks because they're all able to now get the same type of information, same type of data, and also and then have that insight in terms of what's happening with their trucks when they are not in the yard.
And in another part, I know you've mentioned to us as a group, and I've been starting to talk to customers about, because I didn't realize even the technology was there to do this, was, tying in with regards to some rebates, for customers that are obviously paying fuel tax, but not necessarily, fuel on the roads, so running PTOs and other equipment. So that to me was very informative. And I know I've started to talk to a few customers about it, say, you may have a small fleet, but if you're running a lot of non-highway or non-road, hours on your engine, you may want to look at this, and you got to find maybe a point where the costs make sense. But it's interesting that, the technology is down to that point as far as